Hello, everyone. Today we're canning lime curd. Like lemon curd, but lime curd from all those dumpster limes Frugal Daddy rescued the other day. So, here we go! So this recipe comes from the National Center of Home Food Preservation from the University of Georgia, where my ex-husband is a professor. Yes, the ex-husband who is the complete and utter twin of Boris Johnson, without the posh accent. Anyway, we are zesting limes. Now, the recipe would call for a cup of lime zest, except the lime zest is optional, so I didn't really zest a whole cup. That would be a lot of zest. I just zested until I got tired of zesting. Then you put your zest into your big bowl of 5 cups of superfine sugar and set that aside for about half an hour. I didn't have any superfine sugar in the house. Of course, I just had normal granulated sugar like a normal person would have from Aldi, of course. So I put the sugar in the NutriBullet and blended it up into a fine powder, so it became superfine sugar, and then measured it to my 5 cups, added the lime zest, put that aside, and this is sort of a rebel move. Even though I was basically following the recipe would call for bottled lime juice from the store because supposedly that will have a consistent acidity, whereas if you're just squeezing your own limes at home, as Autumn and I did, she was my helper du jour, you wouldn't necessarily have the consistent acidity. But I am not going to go out and buy lime juice to do this. The whole point was to use the dumpster limes, and I'm assuming they're acidic enough. I mean, they're limes, for God's sake. So normally you're supposed to go buy bottled lime juice, but anyway, I'm a rebel. What can I say? We squeezed our limes. So we need 2 cups of lime juice, and then you need a cup and a half of butter, which is 3 sticks of butter cut up into little chunks. Thusly, chunk 'em, chunk 'em, chunk 'em, chunk 'em up. Chunk your butter. The paper got stuck on this one, but then we chunked it. Set that aside for a moment. Then we have to separate eggs. So we needed 14 egg yolks and 8 whole eggs. And then I wanted to save my extra egg whites to make angel food cake, which is why if I got any yolk in the whites, I just dumped that bit in with the yolks, since they get some whole eggs anyway, to make sure that the bowl on the right is just pure egg whites. So I'm not sure how critical that is for an angel food cake. It's critical if you're making meringue or something like that with your egg whites. And I did lose count several times while I was doing this. But I think I ended up with 14 egg yolks plus 8 whole eggs. I did have to stop and count a few times, though. I don't know. But if you do it, don't mess up like I did. You see, I didn't start off using the measuring cup, but I got to that after I contaminated my first batch of whites with a little bit of yolk. There we are, counting. How many are there? How many did I do? So anyway, of course, all those eggshells are going to go in the garden. A little calcium for the tomato plants, a little slug-resistant eggshell barrier, I guess. I don't know if I have a slug issue in the garden, but in case I do, I guess they don't like eggshells. Then we will whisk up the eggs. And I'm not going to pretend that this is the quickest, easiest thing in the world to make. I mean, it may not be difficult, but it wasn't quick. It basically took me 6 hours start to finish, though I did have to stop and charge the phone at one point. And there were several occasions along the way that I just wanted to stop and cry and throw everything against the wall. Okay, so we're adding the sugar and the lime zest, and then we realize that bowl's way too small. I washed out the egg white bowl. I put the egg whites into a Tupperware container and popped them into the fridge, washed out the bowl, and so we're switching to the big bowl. So we're adding the sugar, and I probably should still be using a balloon whisk at this point, not the spatula, because the sugar did kind of get like chunky clumpy, and I think the whisk would have worked better than the spatula at this point. But anyway, stir that all together, and then we're going to stir in the lime juice, and then dump in the butter. Now, you cook this in a double boiler, if you have one. You want your water at a gentle boil, not a rigorous boil. There we go, adding the butter. There's my pan of gently boiling water. And now the thing is, yes, stir, stir, stir. You have to stir the whole time. And this took forever. And eventually, yeah, the butter does melt. I did switch the bowl onto a larger pot. I got a much bigger pot and got some boiling water going and switched because this smaller pot just didn't allow the bowl to sit deep enough. And I think, in fact, the larger pot didn't really allow it to sit deep enough. So you want to make sure that your bowl or the top of your double boiler sits deep enough in your pot of gently boiling water without touching the water, because you want the steam to do the cooking. But I think that's why it took mine so freaking long, because my bowl was too, what do you want to say, like too, not shallow, but it just didn't sit deep enough. All right, so anyway, you're going to stir, stir, stir. You're going to stir the whole time. Eventually it starts to thicken, and you want to cook and stir until your concoction there reaches 170 degrees. And if you don't have a thermometer, I don't know what to tell you. Just cook it for a long time until it starts to get thick. And it will. Now, don't worry about the pulp and the zest and the seeds. Well, these limes had no seeds anyway, but when I did lemons, there were seeds. We're going to strain all this, so it doesn't matter about that stuff. We're going to strain that out, which is what we're doing now. So, put your bowl on a towel on your table or counter or whatever. See, it's gotten much thicker. Isn't that delightful? Probably not thick enough, but thicker. So then we're going to strain it through the sieve. That pot doesn't have the boiling water in it anymore. I dumped that out. And we let it just goop through the sieve to get rid of all the pulp and so forth. Then I like to use the spatula to kind of stir the curd around in the sieve and kind of smoosh it through so that the pulp doesn't clog up the little holes in the mesh and not let the curd go through. So I kind of slop it around, push it through, slop and push, scrape, stir, slop, push, until we get all the curd to go through to the big pot. We let it cool. We're supposed to let it cool before we do the straining. I didn't mention that, but let it cool 5 or 10 minutes or so, let it thicken up some more. And then we're going to be able to put it in our jars and pop them back into the canning pot. Yep, there we go with the rest of the curd. And of course, I'm a fanatical bowl scraper. I don't like to waste anything. Any little bit of anything left in the bowl, I just think, well, that could be a whole other cookie. That could be a whole other brownie. So I scrape, scrape, scrape. Drives me crazy when people don't scrape a bowl. So anyway, at this point, all my jars are in the giant canning pot full of water. Not really vigorously boiling, but just sort of simmering around. And we'll get those out of the pot in a second. So right now, what are we doing? We're straining. And this stuff, there's a lot of sugar, but oh boy, did it taste good. The girls were very excited to lick the spoon and the spatula and all those things that touched the curd. When I made the thumbprint cookies with the lemon curd a few weeks ago, they really, really liked them. And they asked me to make more of those cookies with the lime curd. So that's a good sign. So push it all through until you just sort of have your thick, pulpy mess left over. That pot of hot lime curd almost spilled on me a couple of times, and I thought, oh, good, it's going to be another burn video. I'm going to end up in the hospital again with boiling hot curd all over my legs. All right, so there I am, taking the jars out of the big pot of sort of almost boiling water. And we'll use our special funnel, our special canning funnel from Walmart. I was trying to do this like really tidily, you know, like neatly, without making a giant slopping mess, because I didn't want you guys to think I was super messy, but I couldn't pull it off. It just became a big slopping mess. And the recipe originally calls for half-pint jars, but I'm using pint jars. And the processing time with the half-pint jars is 15 minutes. So with the pint jars, I just kind of doubled that to half an hour. In fact, probably even longer, because every time I can and the water gets boiling, I wander off and do something else and come back, and it's usually done. The timer's on 0. I mean, I guess it's better to overdo it than underdo it if you can't be accurate and attentive to your process. So anyway, I got 4 jars full of the curd, with just a tiny little bit of curd left over that went in the fridge. And then the other jars I am going to be filling, as you'll notice in a moment, with this very chunky applesauce that I like to make. See the chunky? It's very brown because I use a ton of cinnamon. I'm a cinnamony kind of gal. So we're wiping off the rims with our little paper towel with white vinegar on it to make sure there's no food on the rim that would interfere with the seal of the lid. I did do the debubbling thing. I just didn't show it because at that juncture my phone had to charge. But I did. I didn't do it with the curd because it's kind of like a liquid, so how could there be air bubbles? But I did do it with the applesauce because it was so chunky. So wipe, and then we're going to put our little lids on. And then our little ring band things will get screwed on. The lids are over there in the top right in a little Tupperware thing of very hot water. Lids. Lids. I have one wide-mouthed jar amongst all the others. I don't really know why. I just like to, keep it interesting. I like the wide-mouthed jars. I think with the curd, you have about a, half inch of headspace, I think it was. I'm screwing on the lids a lot tighter than I did the last time you saw me can, because you guys told me I wasn't putting my lids on tight enough. So I'm not like cranking them as super tight as I can. I'm just doing them a little tighter than I used to. And thank you for that piece of advice for those of you who watched my jam canning video. Have you guys ever made lemon or lime curd? Have you canned this stuff? Oh, look at that. How did it work for you all? My lemon curd worked well. Alrighty, so we use our little jar lifter. We're popping them back into our giant canning pot. This jar lifter is one of my favorite kitchen utensils now. See, there's our pot. You want at least an inch or 2 of water above the top of the jars, which is easy to achieve with your pint jars. It's harder for me with the quart jars because my pot it's big, but it's pushing it with the quart jars. So once we're bubbling and boiling, we get a good rolling boil going. That's when we start our timer. And the recipe expects you or it or whatever the pot to take at least 25 to 30 minutes to get up to the boiling point. So, okay, so after it's been boiling, I was outside watering in the garden. We turned off the heat. We let it sit in the pot for a good 5 or 10 minutes to cool down. And then we take them out, put them on our dish towel. What's that to the right, you ask? Are those more apples cooking? Oh, no, they're not. Those were potatoes I harvested from my own garden. I'll show you again those. I'll show you those again at the end. So anyway, here are all our jars coming out. We don't worry about the water on top. It will evaporate. We've got our curds. We've got our applesauce. All right, so now we just leave the jars sitting there. We aren't going to poke at them or mess with them or touch them or anything, even though I want to, for 24 hours, and hopefully things will have sealed up properly, and if not, I'll just put them in the fridge and we'll just use them right away. What would I do with lime curd, you ask? I would say I could make lime bars, just like lemon bars, you know, the fancy tea party treat that everybody loves, or thumbprint cookies. That's what I did with my leftover lemon curd when I made lemon curd earlier in the summer and I had extra, so that's what I would do. Thanks for watching, and I hope you all are doing well and hanging in there and striving and thriving and surviving and staying alive and jiving and high-fiving. And hey, if you have a mind to, dumpster diving. So keep up the good work, everybody. Keep the faith. Take care of yourselves. Give yourselves a big hug from me and a kiss on each cheek the French way, you know, mwah, mwah, like that, you know. And I'll see you again soon. Bye. Script, here we are back to the potatoes I grew. Yeah, baby. Yummy.